everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today for the first in our series of webinars. I'll just get the housekeeping out of the way first of all, if that's okay. We're going to keep people's microphones on mute. Apart from those people that are speaking, but please, if you have any comments, any observations or any questions, then please do use the chat function and we will keep an eye on that as we go through and bring those comments in. There will also be time for questions and answers. We've allocated some time at the end for Q&A as well, so feel free to save them there. But if you have something relevant to what we're talking about, then absolutely please bring that in. So in terms of this series and what this is all about, so this is the first in our series of 3. This is a collaboration between IFF Talent, so represented by Javed and Rachel, co-founders today. Also Gravitate Accounting, so represented by co-founder Sam Newton, and First Intuition Yorkshire and Humber, represented by myself, Lucy. We're also really happy to have with us today our 3 expert panel speakers who will be sharing lots of insight with you, lots of valuable experience that they can share. So we have got Lubna Alam from EG Group, so multi-award winning, should I say. Recently winning the Finance Transformation and Change Leader Award at the Northwest Finance Awards this year. We are also thrilled to have Karen Arch with us from BHP, Chartered Accountants, who this year have been named one of UK's best workplaces for women, so very relevant for today. And also Francesca McClory, who is owner of Cloud Accounting, is an absolute advocate for women in finance and also a non-exec director from the AAT. So these 3 wonderful panel members are going to be sharing lots of insight with you, so it won't all be me that you're hearing from. But what I would like to do is just give you a little bit of background for a couple of minutes in terms of how this all came about. So a few months ago, myself and Javed were having a bit of a catch-up just in general, and I'd started to share some observations that I'd noticed from speaking to clients of First Intuition, from speaking to senior partners from accountancy firms across Yorkshire and Humber as part of my role with the ICAW, and realising that we'd seen declining numbers joining the profession and also being promoted through the profession and progressing into senior positions within accounting and finance. And Javed shared that he'd also come across some of these areas and was really keen that we used this as a bit of a platform to generate some conversation and to start thinking about what it is that we might be able to do to try and improve the numbers that were coming through. So we gathered some more information, we gathered some more data, and we just feel that through these conversations it's really important that we can share this information. The data isn't improving, it's declining by all accounts, and so we want to make sure that we're acknowledging this and identifying how we can change and promote women in finance in general. So just to kick off with some of the data and information that I have gathered over the past sort of few months, and actually over the past year, in terms of some of the male to female data. So some of the employers that I work with across Yorkshire and Humber, we identified that recruitment of apprentices in some organisations was 80-20 male to female in any one intake, which is absolutely huge. I've been delivering accountancy training for over 20 years and I have never ever seen that as the ratio of male to female. Chatting to some of the big firms across Yorkshire and Humber, they told me that their applications for intakes for this year were up to 60-40 male to female, so a lot more males applying for roles in the first place, which again was quite surprising. Why is that? We're seeing an increase in females going into STEM type subjects, so why not into accountancy and finance? The ICAW, of which I'm a member, shared with me that over the past 5 years, female student registrations in the UK have averaged only 42% of total registrations. So again, we are way below half of those new students joining the ICAW that are female. From a first intuition perspective, across our network, we have seen that across apprenticeships from level 2, 3, 4 and right up to level 7, female starts have fallen from 46 to 42% between 2021 and 2025. But what we're also seeing is that a higher proportion of females leave their training before completing. So we've got less joining, but a higher proportion leaving. Again, this is concerning. Why is that? What are the reasons for that? How can we help retain that talent? And then finally, before we get into our discussion, a report from the FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, which is data only up to 2023. We're waiting for another report coming out this year, but that data showed that the average percentage of female members and students over that period was only 40%. Compared to the 60% male. And it also showed that in 2023, females made up only 44% of managers in finance, 37% of directors in finance, and just over 25% of partners in finance. So we can see from these stats that those numbers are low. We can see that they're declining in terms of the new members and students coming into the industry. So today, as the first of our series, we want to focus on that attract issue. How do we get them in the door? How do we speak to them about joining the profession? How do we make it sexy? How do we make it interesting? How do we entice them into the profession and ensure that we don't continue to get this imbalance in terms of male to female? Okay, so I've thrown a lot of information out there at you, and what we want to now do is get into some practical dialogue, some real world strategies, and try and open those doors for the next generation, hopefully, and increase that number of females entering the profession. Okay, so just checking we are on track with time. So I'm going to start by bringing in Lubna, and I think Karen maybe joining in this first section as well, starting at that issue of attraction and recruitment. We've seen that less females are applying for roles as an observation. Is this to do with language? Is this to do with job descriptions? Is this to do with adverts? So how can organisations perhaps refine their recruitment language to be more inclusive and maybe attract more females at that initial application? Lubna.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks for inviting me to join this panel. It's really interesting, the stats that you've pulled together. And if I look at my current role, so I'm at EG Group at the moment, been here just over 3 years. I think when I joined the organisation 3 years ago, I had about 270 team members in shared services. 90% of those team members were male, young Asian males between the age of 18 and 30, I would say. So I suppose I joined an organisation where there was very, very few females and probably less than 5 females in kind of management positions, so team leaders, managers, and so to speak. So I think 3 years later, consciously, unconsciously, that demographic has changed for us, not on an active recruitment drive to recruit women, but to just open up those opportunities across the market, because there is a lot of talent out there. And I think now, 3 years on, we're 50-50. 50% of our management roles are women. That diversification has definitely increased across the floor. But I think every organisation is slightly different where you go. This diversification has to come from the top. It has to be a leader-led kind of conversation. So for me in particular, it wasn't a strategy that came from the board. It was actually a strategy that came from me. It's like, why wouldn't ordinarily you'd have more women working in shared services? So what were the barriers for allowing them to come in? I mean, I've got one manager at the moment who I won't name, that kind of said in the early days, she was said, why are you a team leader? Why are you a manager? You should be at home. Which is quite archaic really for this day and age. But I think what I stand by is, if you can see it, you can be it. So breaking those barriers and bringing them in. But even more recently, we've kind of looked at our teams. So again, not coming from the top, is how do we increase the diversity within the teams? Male, female, gender, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But we've started to open that dialogue up with our recruitment teams. So even though those tools are out there on the market, they're not actively being used internally. And so there's a real education piece, I think, along leaders, managers, whoever's doing the recruitment, to say there is a lot of stuff out there that can enable people to come in. But strategy is key, has to come from the top.
Wow, I mean, you've achieved some real changes there in terms of the numbers, haven't you, Lubna, which is amazing. And I agree with, I love the whole see it, be it approach. So have you used gender decoder tools at all? Is that, you know, in terms of the whole fairer recruitment, is that something that you've implemented? Do you think it's to do with the way you've advertised roles?
I think there's a little bit in the past of the actual managers that have been doing the recruiting. I remember in my early days, if I was recruiting and I was a manager, I'd go out and look for people that probably had a personality profile like me, were more like me, and you kind of bring those people in. Whereas the older you get and the more experience you get, you kind of think, actually, I need a more diverse team, different skill sets, and you learn to be more tolerable in it. But more recently here, we definitely have started using those tools, but we're driving it. It's not recruitment driving it. We as a business and my GPOs are going to recruitment saying, I need you to apply some decoder tools here because we need more diverse people within the team.
And have you seen actual results from that? Has the number of applicants or successful applicants increased since using those tools? Is there evidence to show that's been positive?
I think yes, in short, but I think there's other things that we've been doing to promote that. Promote us as a great place to work, promote more, you know, as an organisation, as a culture, what we're about. So to attract more talent to come in and want to come and work for us as well. So whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's going on panels such as these, but really increasing our visibility out in the market. So my GPOs, my direct reports now are women. That's not by choice, but they are really strong, passionate women and know their area of expertise. So the more we go out and talk to people and become known in the marketplace, the more people are going to want to come in and work for us. So they kind of go hand in hand. It can't just be the decoder tools going out there. We have to balance that up.
Excellent. And do you think in terms of then, I suppose, linking into that, traditional recruitment channels, traditional job descriptions, is that stopping women from applying? Is that still out there? Is there that, you know, bias in terms of seeing certain job titles or descriptions that are stopping women from applying?
Depends on the level in which you're applying to. So if you've got a generic job description, it's one of those whether it suits, you know, whether the T's and C's suits you with the organisation, whether the culture suits you, or whether you want your first step into finance. I think if I think about myself, if I was going for a job, I still go down that. I look at the job description and think, oh, I know I haven't done that and I haven't got that experience, so I'm not going to apply. So I think that goes at every level, doesn't it? Where you just down yourself without going for saying, I'm going to give it a go. You never know. I can't have 100% of the experience, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's the stats that probably many people have heard, and I'll probably get the percentage wrong, but there's definitely something out there that says, you know, women will only apply if they tick all of the criteria, whereas men will probably apply if they only meet half of it. And again, I'm not, you know, that's not my opinion. That's something that I've sort of heard and seen. And again, what's stopping us from that, from applying, even if we only meet 70%? So
100%.
Who knows? Karen, can I bring you in to add anything here on this this area?
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to Lubna. So for us at BHP, we have two managing partners, one female and one male. That was just the way it happened. That should go to the point of showcasing that you can have it all. We've got Lisa, we've got Hamish. Lisa is a mum of two, very busy husband, and obviously showcasing that you can have those positions is really important. So it's a great tool for us. Just on the language that obviously you were talking about there, Lubna, I think it's evolved so quickly. I think the workplace has evolved very quickly anyway. But if you think back even probably 5 years, we looked at the gender coded words such as you'll be dominant, you'll be competitive, you'll be a rock star, and that kind of skews towards a masculine kind of energy. The alternative was that you start looking at supportive and nurturing, and that language would then typically skew towards feminine. So sort of aiming for that neutral role relevant language. And there is also that predetermined, we've got a corporate finance, and we struggle for females into the corporate finance because obviously it is seen as traditionally male dominated. because they think it's the cutthroat, you've got to be a certain way, and it's really showcasing the people that you've got within there. We've got some really great females in there, and it's showcasing that. And the last bit is recording it and really monitoring it. I think we've probably been guilty that we just thought, we've sat back and thought, right, we're doing the right thing, but actually, how is that transpiring into the results? So you just ask the question. There's still questions that I wouldn't be able to, answer. If you said, what was the split of the corporate finance versus audit? I don't know, and we should know. So we've still got a lot of learning to do in that side of things. And being that sort of like flexible and showcasing, like I say, just that real kind of, I don't know, a showcase for women that I see. Lisa, she has that. She still has a life. She does really well. She's very, you've met her, very driven, and she balances it all. So that's really super important for us.
It is. It's great to have role models like that, isn't it, that are heading up the organisation. And I agree, in terms of the data, more and more now, if we're seeing that it's a problem, we're using these different tools, the different language, the decoders, the role models. Will be able to see in a year, in 2 years' time, that balance is shifting again. I think that would be really interesting if organisations can start to track that, and then we can start to measure the success of that. That will be fantastic if we can see some positive results. So thank you. That's really interesting, actually. And it's a long time since I've applied for a job, but when we're putting adverts out there, I think we all need to be just a little bit more conscious about that language, about that terminology, and that sort of description perhaps that may put some people off. Fantastic. Okay, as we sort of get on from initially attracting people in, then do we actually think, I'm going to go back to having people come into the industry and actually having that desire to join finance, accounting, tax, whatever we want to call it, finance and accounting, how are we getting people into that role? So as a mum of a 16-year-old who's just started her A-levels, who came back yesterday and said, I'm finding business A-level a bit boring, mum, I'm thinking, right, need to do something about this as a chartered accountant. Right, how do I make this interesting? So, how do we get that message out there earlier? How do we educate these younger females and, perhaps shake off some of the stereotypes? Do we have this historical, I'm going to have to be careful what I say, aren't I? But this historical image of what those professionals, and probably not just accountants, lawyers, solicitors, whatever it might be, do we have that there that is putting them off? How do we get them interested in it? How do we get them excited in it? So I know, Karen, that at BHP you do a lot of engagement, a lot of outreach stuff with schools. So do you think there is still this image issue in terms of accountancy?
Yeah, there's definitely an issue. I think, you can see it work in some elements, like construction, they're going in much earlier. They're going in at primary school as opposed to waiting until you get to secondary school. This is actually a true story. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, her daughter struggles with maths. She's going to do her GCSEs this year, and she's not doing well. She's like, we need to find her a tutor. And I said to Lois, what's going on with you? And she said, you're either good at maths or you're good looking. So we can see which way she wants to be an Instagram star. And I said, Lois, that's terrible. I work in accountancy. But she said, well, it's too late for me. If you don't do maths A-level, then you can't be an accountant anyway. So I thought, God, she knows me. She's known me since the day she's been born. So even she's got those preconceived ideas. I think another issue is that the careers within schools, particularly in high schools, they were eradicated as a bit of a cost saving. There is usually a teacher within the school who's very passionate about it, but they're doing it on the side of their desk. Mm-hmm. And you will also find most schools will look at the traditional ways of going to university and then looking at becoming an accountant. And I'd be a millionaire if I had the people coming to me saying, well, I'm good at maths, so I'm going to be an accountant. And we know historically that females don't tend to do as well in that maths side. So we do reach out. Max Lyrical lots about this, but and Jane within my team on the work experience academies that we do. We don't just say that you have to want to work into finance, and I'm sure Jane will back me up. We've had people come in, females who wanted to work as an air hostess. And when they came in and did the work experience, because we helped them with like interview skills, they were like, actually, it's actually quite interesting, isn't it? There's actually different elements. So once you get in front of them and talk to them, there is much more interest. But I think we have to go much earlier to meet them much earlier, rather than waiting, because, you know, Lois is all about image, right? She'll kill me for saying this, but she's all about the image, and she wouldn't dare say to her friends, I absolutely love maths, it's the best thing. You know, her getting a tutor is like this, you know, you've got to keep it secret. Like literally, you cannot tell anybody you're getting help with it. So there's a sort of real perception about that. And I think also just they wonder long term whether they can, you know, carry on. Will it be, you know, is it very male dominated? Maybe the images they see in the press, maybe the images they see on websites is very male driven, and and what they're seeing is reinforcing that it's a male environment and they don't particularly want to do that. So definitely much earlier than we're doing now. And you know, the careers teacher, you know, I think we all dreaded it when I was at school, definitely, but I think there's a much more influence we can have much earlier on, and it's just getting out there into community and breaking those barriers.
Yeah, I agree. We do a lot of work with schools, and exactly what you've said. Come and have a chat to us, you know, come and see what we're about. Oh, I'm not good at maths. No, so I can't come and speak to you. And I'm like, well, what do you like? So somebody might say geography. Okay, well, there's a lot of analytical skills that go with doing geography. I know a lot of people with geography degrees that have ended up going into accountancy. So can you analyse? Can you look at that information and tell the story? And suddenly you start to see them go, oh, well, actually, yeah, I do quite like that. And I do like that. So you've got a spreadsheet and you've got a calculator to do the calculations, but what are you doing with it next? So there's a lot of preconceived ideas out there. And as you say, trying to get into schools earlier is super important. So I guess in terms of, you know, you said earlier, how early? Where do we change that perception? Are we talking primary school? Are we talking year 7? How early? And how do we do that? What do we need to be doing at those schools?
I mean, I'm not going to, you know, nominate my team to hang around maternity wards, but it will be definitely, Jane always say, not more work. Definitely in the primary schools, because like you say, it's still a perception that it's maths, and therefore if you can't, you know, you can't add up 2 and 2 and you don't get to 4, then that will be a career already that's not for you. I think if you've got parental support, or you've got someone bringing you up who's within professional services, who understands accountancy, then you're more likely, I think it's almost a relevant male female, because they will show you the way. What we're trying to look at is really attracting outside of the professional services, because you might not necessarily have a parent who works within professional services, and therefore, you know, how do you reach them? And they're the ones you definitely need to get much earlier on. And like you say, it's about, I like to travel. Well, guess what? You're going to go and see a load of your clients and go out on site, and you're going to go and do this, and you've got tools to help you with the maths side of things. Well, I like speaking to people. I like to have variety. Okay, again, I can give you that within the career. So definitely much earlier on in the primary school.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And as you've said, you know, you kind of know what you know, and we've talked about you've got to see it to be it. But, you know, if nobody in your family's ever been in that industry or that kind of profession, then how on earth do you know exactly what that is? And despite being a chartered accountant, I think my daughter will still do everything she can not to follow what I'm doing. But I equally don't think she'll be a bricklayer like her dad. So yeah, we'll see where we're going to go with that one. Lubna, do you have anything to add on this in terms of the outreach, the education at a younger age to get more females in?
I think it's fascinating when we relate maths to being an accountant, because I didn't do brilliantly at my GCSEs. I got through. I went to college. I didn't do maths A level. Did business studies, funnily enough, enjoyed it, and did accounting and loved problem solving. So you don't have to be a great mathematician to do accounting, really. But I think there's so many variations in our world, and nobody gets it. They don't understand it. I was having a conversation with an IT colleague this morning, and he said, I don't like finance. And I'm like, why? You don't know anything about it. That's like me saying I don't like IT, and there's so many variations in IT. So you have a discussion. He's like, oh, I never thought about it like that. But I know when I was at school, work experience, you've got to do 2 weeks in the summer, and the school tries to fit you in wherever you need to go, probably need to put a little bit more thought into what do you like and what do you not like. I know as an employer we get loads of work experience kids coming through the door, and I think sometimes it's a tick box exercise rather than we want a profession in finance, we want to come in, we want to spend some quality time with you. So I think up front, before the kids actually come in for work experience, there needs to be some dialogue. If we're an active employer bringing people in, then we should make time to go into those schools and explain what it is that we want to do, and have the children come in that actually want a career in finance or want to explore it more. I've recently become a governor of a local school, chair of governors. So for me, I'm quite passionate about this stuff. My job's all about people, and I've got a lot of young people and a lot of experience and a lot of advice to give and guide. So I definitely will be tapping into that from a school perspective and as a local employer to go in and start talking about the opportunities that are available.
Yeah, I think it's important that we do give that time, isn't it? Because as we've said, the resource often isn't there in the school itself. Any other comments on the education and outreach before we move on to our next topic and bring Francesca in? No, fabulous.
I don't know. Sorry, Lucy. It was.
That's okay, David.
I'll get covered in a couple of the next sections, but I guess the role of the industry, because you can always talk about a role that BHP or EG or Future Cloud individually can do to promote a finance career and doing their bit, but I guess taking it at a much higher level, what about the institutes, and for them to really sort of play a part in sort of a better PR and marketing and promotion, because ultimately they're the sort of figureheads of the industry, and they're the ones that ultimately, if you're going through and choose to do one of the qualifications that so yeah, I guess what role the institutes need to play, and ultimately that a lot of the stereotypes has been sort of driven by the profession that has been built sort of by them going back decades and decades. I don't know what any of the sort of panel think about that as well.
I mean, I know I would say that I know certainly ICAW, AAT do a lot of initiatives with schools. A lot of that's more to do with social mobility rather than necessarily with male versus female. However, still the same issue, getting that message out there, and they do a lot of outreach in that, and they have a RISE program and an Access Accounting program that I know are really successful. What I've noticed more is that there's a lot more, which is going to lead us nicely onto the next section in terms of videos and adverts on social media. But I absolutely agree, it needs to start with those the professions and the institutes as well. Yeah, and I think Francesca may well be able to add a little bit more as we go on here. But again, anybody else, do feel free on the panel to chip in.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lucy, because what does the modern day accountant look like? And I feel like on social media, it's so important to showcase what that truly does look like, and showcase that accounting's got a lot more skills to it. You've got to be more commercial minded as well, I think. And that's exactly why when I was in a corporate environment, I didn't thrive or shine, because there were limitations, because I came in at an older age, for example, probably being female as well. It was quite a traditional firm, and they've probably changed a lot in I think I left 6 years ago. So that's when I started Future Cloud Accounting. But the reason why I started a business as well was to be the change I wanted to see. And that's where the start of my journey on social media is, like, where I showcased what I was doing as a business, how I wanted to look as a business, feel. And to be honest, I started it not really thinking about attracting employees, because one, I didn't know where we were going to go at the beginning. But I love inspiring other individuals to be who they are. You don't have to speak a certain way. You don't have to look a certain way. So I think that's really where I started. And I do think as the world goes by, more older firms will be having to use social media to provide information about their firm, their culture, their value. And where are the younger generation hanging out? They actually are hanging out on TikTok. And if you're not an influencer or cool to some degree, they're not interested, are they? And Gen Z are very different in their work ethic to us millennials, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I heard I didn't know that people were advertising roles on TikTok. I didn't know that was a thing, because I'm not on TikTok.
Not yet.
The ones I'm not on. So how are TikTok, Instagram, how are they helping in change that image, and do other organisations need to ensure that they're using those platforms as well?
Yeah, so for example, we're on TikTok as Future Cloud Accounting. I do some as myself, Francesca, but interestingly, when we started TikTok, I was probably the typical, because I do a lot more of LinkedIn. Why am I doing this? But I've got 2 children, 19 and 16, and they are all over TikTok. So I did ask them. So I definitely believe in having a profile on their platform, a landing page, let's call it then, for sure. And create some fun TikToks. It's okay. I know it. At first, I was thinking, is people going to assume that we're a bit silly? But actually, the way you can do the TikToks, it shows humour, which is a good thing in a very professional environment. I think that's nice. That's great. But also, you can share some fun stuff, but with some educational stuff. And people are losing, what's the word where you're losing? Like, they can't sit still for longer than 5 minutes. So a short, sharp reel probably works better, maybe than an hour-long webinar, no offence. But people do want to consume a lot of content in 5 minutes nowadays.
Yeah.
So I do think with TikTok, it might need a bit of a strategy plan, but a landing page and some colour and some vibrant videos and who you are as a firm will land really well when you want the younger talent through.
So if we're looking for a marketing campaign, next gen, to attract more women, career in finance, number one, it needs to be short. What else do we need in there to make this the best marketing campaign that we want out there?
I'll get your employees on it as well. Definitely get your employees on it. For example, so we hired somebody in March this year, but she went to a traditional firm. I know them very well. And she ended up coming to us because she saw us on TikTok, Instagram, all the usual platforms, but the culture and the care and the support that she wanted. And also 22-year-olds want to clock on at a certain time. I have to get my head around this. They want to clock on and they want to leave at a certain time, don't they?
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm like, oh my God, I used to do extra and I used to rush to get in earlier, but that's okay. And as long as you get the value from them in that working hours, they should be able to take the time off and switch off, So it's like, she liked the fact that we were flexible. She liked the fact that we're on social media as well. So it does work.
Yeah, it does. We find that our most successful posts that our team put out on marketing are the ones about the members of staff. And they're interested in what people like them are doing. So yeah, as much as not all of our staff are Gen Z by any means, but they're interested in what they're doing. The apprentices that we have in our business, they're interested in that sort of personal side of things. Would the others on the panel agree with that in terms of this use of social media and how we market this for a profession for young women?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I attended something, it was a while ago, and they talked about British Gas, interestingly, where they got some influencer to do a day in the life of somebody working in British Gas, and then that evolved into somebody actually doing the job, and they saw their recruitment increase significantly. One, because I didn't know who it was, but I'm sure everybody else did. They knew who the person was who's doing the influencing, they were showing the work, and obviously then they got other people to do that. So we actually trialled it as well at BHP. It was a bit they would took the video around about what they were doing, and actually we got a really good reception back from that. So actually seeing and hearing real life stories definitely helps. But the biggest takeaway I took from the seminar that I went to, it was basically how it was led by someone in Gen Z, and she was saying, you've got to understand that we have been brought very different to you, for example, that we've been fed an algorithm all our lives. So we've been told on where to look and where to go. And then suddenly you are trying to get in to something that might not even cross our paths if we don't know about professional services, don't know about accountancy. And therefore unless you tell us, we're not going to go into that algorithm. And therefore you're always going to be on this side periphery. And do you know what? It was just such an enlightenment moment. I was like, yes, I understand that. I also have 2 sons. one's 17, one's 14, and I see it through them that they see certain things, because they go down a sort of rabbit hole, and they get thrown more and more, don't they, of that kind of element, whatever that subject or topic is. And so I think that's such a critical point. You've got to get in at some point, and obviously social media is one of the biggest way, well, it's the best way probably to to get into it. When I applied for a job, I got a magazine, I got a paper, my mum circled it, and she used to send me cuttings when I was at university, and that's how you applied. You might, 2 weeks later, I'd get a bit of paper and have to go to the post office. Those days are over. It's much more immediate, much more, you've got to be there, present for them, and it's got to be quick, short, sharp, and as soon as you get the algorithm in, then obviously then you're in their periphery to then help to influence it.
Yeah, and like the younger generation don't want the pressure and of study and the traditional models. If you like, don't pass your exam, you're out, sort of thing. I think that women thrive when they feel safe and be able to speak openly and have that support. It speaks volumes. And I think the traditional accountant is changing. The more modern accountant for me is the soft skills, and that's for me is what I'm looking for. So yeah, I think that's a big change to see as well. There's also not even just the younger generation. So I had somebody who joined our firm from being in 20 years in a traditional firm, and she followed me for 3 years on social media before joining, and she's in her 50s. So it can work, and the amount of time she said to me, she didn't feel good enough in her old place. She was kept below the senior males, for example. She was on a different salary scale. Yeah, it's quite shocking, to be fair.
Yeah, it's that, we've got this, you say, outdated stereotypes we've talked about that are perhaps deterring women from coming in. In terms of the imposter syndrome you've just talked about, didn't feel confident enough, didn't feel I was able to, put myself out there. And we do have to change the way that we, lift those people up. And this is everybody really, but there is that tradition that these senior roles are male. So why do I even bother in the first place? It's potentially that you're not even going to try, because we've always sort of had this in our head that actually those senior roles aren't filled by women. And it's really good to see that is changing. And as a modern finance professional, whether it be somebody changing career or firm at 50, or whether it be somebody coming in at 18 or 21, that actually we are changing that and challenging it. Any final points or observations on sort of marketing and social media?
I think the only point I'd add is that it's interesting that we've talked about our children and how we live and breathe the world and learn through their eyes. And I think it makes us better leaders, managers, and think about the future more. I think that point around, I worked in construction, and construction is definitely male dominated. So, even though you've got the skills, it's really hard to fit in sometimes, really. If it was a construction, it was builders, and that level of conversation is, how do you become part of that? I think different sectors, different things, but I do definitely love the fact that we're all living through our children and using that experience to help drive what we need to do in the future.
Yeah. And it's, you learn from that, because they have different values and they have a different focus, and they're very more open to other things. And us being able to take that into our organisations is really going to help with that.
I think, I'm sure, just picking up on one of Francesca's points, and I'm sure Sam won't mind me saying this as well, and Francesca, you'll know, I think it's Rachel Harris and, one or two others, that there's proven examples, even in this early sort of stage of accounting firms and companies modernising and enhancing their sort of outreach and this multi-channel strategy across social media, and how, and obviously Karen, you mentioned the influencer thing, that how it can have an impact in drawing people in, but also, we're talking about early careers and people coming into the profession. I think more and more you'll see Francesca's example of women in roles at the moment working across practice in the industry. And I think what they're looking for, whether it's another firm or a finance team in another company, they're looking for these environments where, they do sort of feel sort of safe, and it isn't those sort of traditional masculine sort of cultures, and sadly a lot of them still do exist. And obviously, with Sam's example with Gravitate over the last few years as well, I think the more you do, the more you will attract people at all stages of their career journey. And you mentioned someone in their 50s, that across the board, I think there's almost a missed opportunity that if you do it and market it well and then live and breathe it, obviously you've got to have a culture that isn't just words, that you're going to find attracting people, a lot more easier, and then getting a lot more sort of balance in your finance team. And then, providing you've got the culture right, you won't find recruitment as much of a challenge as, some may do. So, just wanted to lead with that. And I guess the final point around this is, I think there's a generational sort of issue as well. There's a lot of resistance about wanting to change and, oh, well, we did it this way. And, when I came into the profession, it was like this. So I think you have, unfortunately, generation millennial-wise that, amongst that group, there are some that are just struggling with the sheer amount of evolution and change that needs to happen, and they just can't get their heads around it. We speak to them a lot. So, and you can't change everyone en masse, but it's just these what we're looking at, just incremental changes in organisations and individuals that are, showing that it is possible, and hopefully then builds up more momentum, and more then start doing it as as the years go on.
Absolutely, it's got to start somewhere, hasn't it, Javed? And even if it's just that small change, then hopefully, as you say, incrementally, we will see that go through. So we've talked about getting them interested. We've talked about engaging with schools and early on. We've talked about marketing and social media. So if we get all that right and we get them to apply, and they're getting into our recruitment process, and we're getting to assessment centres or hiring and interviews, we've seen that in terms of having, first of all, less people start that process, which we've talked about how we can perhaps improve that. But once they then get into that assessment process, we're seeing that less females are being hired. So what is that we are missing here? Is it to do with the type of interviews? Is it to do with the psychometric testing that's being used? So in terms of that assessment stage, how can we assess or ensure fairness and inclusivity for females at that point? Karen or Lubna at this point?
Yeah, so our stats probably reflect what you said at the beginning. So obviously we're down on female applicants. We do track as they go through the journey. So they will put an application in. Interestingly, this year, for the first time, we've asked people to put a CV in, which we haven't traditionally done. And actually, that hasn't prevented any dropout at that point. So we are measuring that. We do see that when we use SHL, the tests, which are psychometric tests, which are aptitude and obviously behavioural, we do see quite a dropout, particularly on the sort of verbal reasoning, the maths that they don't hit our benchmarks. So again, we're looking at that. We're actually in communication with SHL at the moment. We're going through it and saying we want to understand why we think that females aren't getting through that particular score, because we're changing everything else. So it's a bit of we'll see what comes out, because we've just literally started, because we've just started our new trainees this time on Monday. So we're at the position now, we're going to obviously reopen sort of for next year, and we want to really understand about what's happening with the tests. Like I say, we're looking at each stage that we are in the process. You mentioned it earlier, Lucy, I think in the interviews as well, historically, males tend to do better than females. And we've talked about before, is it because they sell themselves more? Are they happy to talk about their achievements compared to females who aren't as confident or don't talk about their achievements? So we're looking at those elements. We always do a face-to-face interview. That's a 20-minute sort of initial one, because we don't want to use AI. I know some of the Big Four are using AI in the interview process, and we often get people coming to us, actually male and female, saying, I don't want to be interviewed by a computer. And we had one gentleman who said he failed the test on one element, which was empathy, and he struggled how he could get the AI to understand that he was empathetic. So that's definitely helped us. It's actually a positive for us going forward. And then when they do the interviews, what we're looking at is that, again, going back to that role model conversation, who are the hiring managers? Do they have an unconscious bias? Are we using more male managers than female managers? Are we using trainees to come to the actual face-to-face interview? We don't use assessment centres. We have done historically. We haven't used them. I think it happened before I joined because of COVID. Obviously, lots of things happened then. But we haven't gone back to the assessment centres. And interestingly, we've just been speaking to our candidates this time saying, how would you have felt if we had used an assessment centre? Would it have put you off? Would you have thought, oh, it's awful? And 9 times out of 10 so far, they've said, well, we just expected it. We expected the assessment centre. And again, obviously, I've got no comparison to see how male and females, compare with an assessment centre. So that is one element that we will look at. Just interestingly as well, I've talked about the split of our male and female, but when we're looking about who we're attracting, in terms of female, our female applicants who are successful and join us are average older than they are male. So our average age for a female that's just started is 26 years old. The male is 22.6 years old. So what we're finding is, and the oldest was 43 and the youngest was 19. For the males, the youngest was 18 and the oldest was 32. So we are finding a lot of people are changing careers, and we seem to do very well with females who change careers. And interestingly, teachers is a big conversion for us. They've, for various reasons, why they want to come out of the teaching world. So it's something that we've got a head of talent, Sarah, that we were talking about to say, do we take that information that we know and then do we create campaigns to attract females who may be older? So change a career. It could be because they need flexibility. Could be because I don't know, maybe it's obviously historically childcare falls mainly to the females. Do they want a career path that's not like this? They can have a more linear career path with us if that's what they want. So we were like, are we missing a trick here? So of course, we're going to continue to attract and go into schools, etc. But we're also potentially looking at those career change ones. And the more that we get, the more that we can then showcase them on, like, back to the images and everything to show, actually, this person came along at 43 and decided they wanted a bit more flexibility in their career and they came to accountancy. For me, I think that's the biggest news. As an influencer, when we talk about influencing, I think, I'm sort of nearly 50, but I was like, oh, right, wow, anybody can do it with the background that they've got. So just thought it was a really interesting fact to share, that we're sort of looking at school, but we've obviously got a lot of people who are wanting to change careers.
Yeah, I find that those stats really interesting, actually, Karen, in terms of your male to female age. It is interesting to see how we have more career changes perhaps in females, and that may be the reason why some of them are also leaving the profession early, as well as joining it a change. Lubna, did you have anything to share there in terms of the sort of hiring process and how we can make that more objective in terms of females?
The only thing I'll add is specifically we ran a graduate recruitment process for 2 years on the dot, and we ran an assessment centre and we had basic psychometric tests once they'd been selected, but that had been a huge success. And interestingly, we actually hired more women than we did males, to be honest with you. But I think we split the interview process up into a group activity, to a single interview, to doing some psychometrics. But I did find the women were a little bit more open. It's those social skills, because I think for me, it's more about, you can always teach somebody how to do a job. You can't teach them the behaviours. And so what are those soft skills? What's their appetite to learn and grow in that kind of role? Mm-hmm. So we look at it more holistically. And from an interviewing technique perspective, I know from a seniority perspective, we balance it up now. We don't, if I was looking for a GPO, I wouldn't just go and do the interview myself. I'd go for an FD on a counterpart and say, come in, because you're going to look at it very different. Well, so you'll know that I'm looking at it from a particular angle, and you'll help me look at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, look at the time already. Some really insightful things there. We've got a couple of questions actually that have come into the chat box. So if you do have questions, this is your opportunity to type those in if you would like. So Kemi, I was going to ask about other demographics and the intersectional nature of these. For example, are there fewer older ethnic minority women? Plus some who cover multiple categories. So I guess in terms of any other observations, we've got not just the male to female, but I should say looking at sort of the ethnicity as well, which I know, Lubna, you'd commented on to start with in terms of some of the stats that you had more young Asian males. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest with you, right now, I'm saying to my GPOs, you need to balance this up now because we've got a very young demographic from a workforce perspective, and that brings its own problems, right? In retaining them, keeping them entertained, and keeping them. So I'm kind of saying to them, we need to start looking at an older demographic to come in and balance that up. Would I go out purposely and look at different ethnic backgrounds? For me, I don't really mind. If you come in, you can do the job. The job's yours, and that's what we're looking for. Really, it's not to tick any boxes per se, but entertaining quality rather than quantity. To be honest with you, if you can come in and do the job, and that's all we ask. Come in, do your job, and go home. No more, no less.
Yeah. Any other comments on the other demographics there?
Yeah, same as Lubna. What we say at BHP, so Hamish has a teenage daughter, and he always says he would want BHP to the place that his daughter, irrelevant, would be safe and have a good career, and he knows that we're a good employer. So whoever comes in, it's a bit like Lubna, the best that you can be, and we will look after you the best that you can be.
Excellent, thank you. Another comment here from Hannah. What role can mentorship play in attracting more females into the industry? Francesca, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely amazing if I had that myself when I was in a corporate environment. It's like maybe they got underneath who I was as a person and what other abilities that I have rather than the traditional methods, then I would have thrived a lot more. I think mentorship is very powerful. And you look at your leaders as well. It's very true that you are inspired by your leaders above, and that needs to come from the top and move downwards as well. So yeah, and I love the next question or statement. Is that from
Sarah?
Yeah, that is so true. So many women, I feel like it's the men as well, to be fair. It's not all women, but mostly women with like having small kids, flexibility is so important, checking in with them. So I feel like we get dismissed, as a mother, and we can dismiss ourselves. Like I nearly dismissed myself back when I was in that environment because I felt like I wasn't going to get anywhere anyway. And I didn't go on to do my ACA. They did want me to move on to do chartered. Well, just because I don't want to do chartered doesn't mean I shouldn't have any other way of earning my potential and doing different things. And I think that's going to get even more so in the future, that you can be an accountant won't necessarily need to do that, but they can be such a good accountant in different ways. And yeah, I really appreciated Sarah's comment there.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? In terms of if you're committed to it and you put your mind to it, it shouldn't matter if you're working part-time. It shouldn't matter if you're doing a job share, working flexible hours. Ultimately, if the work's going to get done that needs to get done, then should those other things matter? So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't underestimate us women that can juggle kids. Honestly, like you should be using us a lot more.
And we've just got another comment from Shahida, who no there. Hi Shahida. Lots of great work at Morrison's, removing some of the barriers to entry for women, which is fantastic. But equally not wanting to alienate the men. So yeah, we're not here to kind of say, right, move over, we're here, this is all about us. Absolutely not. But yeah, how do you address comments, apprehension from men who feel that this initiative may be sexist? So are we getting any feedback from men? There are some men on the call here. Is there that feeling of this is going the other way and we're being sexist and prioritising women? What do we think?
Yeah, it'd be good to hear about this.
Can I just chip in here? So it's very interesting because here at EG I did a little bit of women in leadership, or like in 11s is for women, the women to get together and just have coffee. And it was amazing how all the men on the floor kind of said, what on earth's going on here? Why are we not invited to this kind of thing? But I think the only other thing I'll say is around imposter syndrome. So I ran a session internally on imposter syndrome and invited lots of women and men, but I actually had the CIO and the European CFO who both sat there and said they suffered from imposter syndrome. They don't talk about it as much as we do. We're very open with our thoughts and feelings, but in that inclusivity, I think the more we talk about it and the more we engage with them, I think the more they'll be on side.
Same for us, just internal mentors, and having that that men will also stay for the imposter syndrome, and we've matched people up that you might not necessarily have seen. So again, I go back to the comment of whoever thrives are the ones who come to the party, will help you thrive into whatever you want to do. It's irrelevant. You just be the best person that you can be, and we'll help you get to that point. So we've not had the pushback.
Excellent, that's fab to hear. So we've
jumping in quickly, Lucy. Like as a male, like I say, I just want to learn more than anything. I think that I run a practice, and I think recently we have seen, I think we went through a phase of hiring 4 or 5 males in a row. Like I said, our stats lean towards more of a male team, and I don't think, I think even when we've been posting about getting people onto this event, I think Rachel got a comment on a LinkedIn about why is this needed, or this is sexist or something, and it's like, I think, I say, if people see it as that, then that's the way they view things. I think we need to see it as an opportunity to learn, because the stats speak for themselves. The stats are the stats.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Sam. Just thank you, Leslie, for your comment about being a mentor, and well done for doing that, saying it's not as time consuming as you may think, and there's lots of simple things you can do. Finally, just to plug the other 2 webinars in this series, 22nd of October, which is a Wednesday at 12 o'clock again. That one's going to focus on development and progression, and Sam has popped in the chat box where you can click and register for that one. And then on the 26th of November, the 3rd in the series will focus on retention and leadership. So we're taking this all the way through, from getting them interested right the way through to sort of senior careers and positions. But I'd just like to say a massive thank you to our 3 panel members, Lubna, Francesca and Karen. Thank you so much for giving up your time. I found it really, really interesting. I hope everybody else on the call has as well. Just made it in time. It's still 1 o'clock according to my clock. So thank you very much. And I hope to see some of you soon. Thank you.